Okay, so we'll probably give it around 2 minutes and then we'll start the presentation just whilst we wait for people to... Everyone always seems to come right on the dot of 7.
So this is my kid is having the same thing in school because they're doing like online. So it's like, imagine online Waldorf. That's like, could you imagine like a month ago that there would be such a thing as online Waldorf school? But they eventually had to do it. And so like all the kids come like right on time. Like nobody, the teachers are telling them like, come at least a minute early. And so that's the nature of online communication.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, like when you're late for an online meeting, you really have no excuse. Like you're not like running from room to room. You're just going from link to link, and people are still late.
Yeah, but you know the problem is that like usually like your connection just kind of starts kind of behaving strangely when you're about to, or like there is like an update. Zoom wants an update, and you click yes by accident, and you're like, oh no, another 5 minutes, like downloading and updating.
Yeah, I'm scared about my connection from the forest.
Pretty good.
I think it's doing okay so far. I'm just worried. We'll see how it holds.
Where are you, James?
I'm at an HS2 camp.
What's
I got here today.
HS2?
HS2, yeah. Yeah, it's near Harville Road. It's in Aylesbury. So I'm going to be here for the next week, I reckon. Yes, hence my tent. And it's so beautiful. Well, this is trees, but trees always beautiful, so it's fine. Yeah.
How close are you to construction?
Well, apparently they were going to come evict us on Monday, but there was a legal challenge, so it might be delayed for a few days. So we'll see.
Okay, cool. Well, I think we'll start and we'll just wait for people maybe to start flowing in, and maybe we can do like a little bit of an introduction. So welcome everyone to the Animal Rebellion Stream of Solidarity. Tonight we have Ivan Marovic, who is an organiser from the Otpor movement, who were a fundamental part in creating a wave of resistance against the tyrannical Milosevic regime in Serbia during the late 1990s. So Ivan's going to give us a talk about the strategies of Otpor. But before we do, James has a couple of things just to add it. So you'd like to speak, James?
Yeah, I can jump in, and I hope my connection is stable enough. I guess just some Zoom etiquette.
We've lost you, James.
Zoom etiquette makes it stable.
Hold on, let me try messaging. Okay, so perhaps maybe I could fill in on that. So Zoom etiquette, if you can, please keep muted whilst other people are speaking, just so we can sort of follow the talk quite well. We'll be having Q&As after Ivan's given the talk, but if you feel like you want to ask a question at some point within the talk, feel free to put it in the chat and we'll keep track of those and come to them at the end. Obviously, we're just being quite wary because there's been Zoom bombers recently, so we're trying to stay vigilant about that. If anyone notices anything suspicious amongst other people on the call, just send us a private message and we can sort it out. Yeah, and I think that's pretty much what James was going to say.
I'm back.
Oh, there, he's back now. I've just gone over a little bit of etiquette, but if there's anything you want to add, James.
I had no idea what you said, but yeah, you say like questions in the chat and we'll do Q&A at the end. Nice one.
Wicked.
What else was I going to say? Oh, I was going to say, yeah, like personally, I think I'm quite excited to have Ivan here, like someone from Otpor speak, because I guess Anna Rebellion's taken a lot of inspiration from Otpor in terms of like using comedy and protests and like making polls. Like they were a group that put on, like got so many people got to get involved in the movement, and I think that's, yeah, it feels like a very big privilege to be speaking to someone so from Otpor. So I guess, yeah, thanks so much, Ivan, and yeah, really looking forward to it. And yeah, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, James, and thanks, Daniel, and thanks, everyone. And it's really a privilege and honor to be doing this short talk. I'll try to make it like really short, and then to kind of have like a like Q&A as much as we can. But even now, when we are kind of in this initial stage, you know, I encourage you to use chat and, you know, just kind of type a question. I will immediately respond and kind of maybe divert the talk to cover the issue that is at hand. But again, we're going to have plenty of time for kind of discussion later. I intend this talk to be like very short. So let me now share the screen, because I prepared a very short presentation that is going to help me make the okay. And oop, and now you should be seeing this same thing. Okay, so the what we're going to talk about is how did we create a wave of resistance? In other words, how did we achieve the mass mobilization that also was connected to the kind of transformative moment that was created, and also the kind of active participation of the people. So it's kind of one aspect of the Otpor strategy. I think it is a key aspect, and there are like other areas that we are probably going to touch in the Q&A. But I think this is, if we can single out one thing that kind of made Otpor special and made it like at the time kind of innovating organization or innovating movement, that is this kind of active participation that was created, the wave of resistance, how to put it. So I'm gonna give you like a very short history just for people who are not aware, and you know, even I tend to forget what happened. That was like the 20th century. Then we're going to talk about that Otpor's model, and we're going to have a lot of Q&A at the end. So that's going to be the layout of the evening. So first, what I want to say is to put it in the context that what Otpor had to fight, and the things that we were growing up with, was the populist insurgency in the 1980s. So there was a crisis of the current political system. That was the socialism that existed in former Yugoslavia. And because the kind of people were disillusioned in the system and they didn't believe that it could go on, a lot of kind of politicians decided to use the populist rhetoric that was at the time ethnic bigotry and nationalism and religious and other forms of intolerance to kind of propel themselves into positions of power. So Milosevic was actually the pioneer in former Yugoslavia. He was the first one to do it. His rise to power was called Anti-Bureaucratic Revolution. This is how he called it, because they were similarly to like the Trumpists of today. They were like kind of against the civil servants, against the elites, against the state, administrative state, and all that. And what essentially happened in the end was the war and destruction. So when we were growing up and then we were, you know, kind of coming of age, this was the setting, you know, the like nationalist, populist mobilization and civil war and kind of destruction and you know, everything that goes with it. So that is an important detail that kind of influenced the method of our struggle. One of the things was that, you know, we really hated populism. We really hated like mass mobilization as such, because the one that we experienced was like a very negative one. So we kind of had to reinvent that. And then the other thing was like we really hated violence because of the war. So these were the two things that kind of influenced us from the beginning. So when Otpor was born in 1998, so, and I will talk about the kind of the Otpor model shortly. So we could say that, oh, we're so brilliant, we were, you know, like so smart, we came up with this like really awesome model and all that stuff. But what was happening at that time was that there was actually in late 1997 and early 1998, so right before Otpor was born, there was an upsurge in like student organizing at the Belgrade University. So a dozen different organizations popped up, student organizations. They're very different. They took like different approaches, different methods, how to organize. And, you know, some of them like took a very traditional NGO route, so very small, like say like almost like a think tank kind of style. Some of them kind of try to resemble trade unions. Some even try to resemble like institutions like student parliament and different organizations and different styles and different methods. So Otpor came out as the most successful, and most of the others were soon forgotten. But I tried to kind of still look at the bigger picture, and it wasn't that, you know, we were the only ones and we were smart. We were actually there was like a laboratory, there was a pool of different organizing attempts or laboratory of different experiments, and Otpor came out as the successful experiment. So, you know, let's say maybe, you know, in some parallel universe, like some other organization like the Student Political Club or the Democratic Youth for Monarchy would be the one to come up with the ultimate, how shall I say, organizing style, and you would be talking to them. But I want to kind of point out that, you know, there was a vibrant organizing scene at the time, and Otpor just happened to be the one, like in evolutionary terms, to like to fit best, and therefore it survived. How to put it? So there are two organizing schools here, and Otpor actually kind of emerged by learning from both schools. So what happened in 1998 is that, you know, some students were veterans of the student protests, so they were really good, myself included. We were really good at mobilizing people for particular actions. So we would be able to pull out like thousands of people into the streets, and we would be able to organize mass demonstrations and strikes and things like that. And so we were coming from so-called protest school, and we were not affiliated with political parties or any organizations. We had actually didn't like them much, and our main approach was that, you know, this is where you organize. You kind of do mass mobilization. You look for people where they are, and you just kind of bring them out, and you immediately put them in action rather like, is it a march or a demonstration or any kind of action? Then there was another school, and that was people who were formed in their respective organizations, mostly political parties, but also there were some young people who were members of trade unions and NGOs. And so their kind of approach was more like, you know, like slow march to the institutions and that kind of stuff. So we were both disillusioned with the way we were doing things. And when we started talking to each other, like we from the protest side, we were like, how can we make this last longer? And then people who were members of different organizations, they were thinking, how can we make this more energetic, more enthusiastic, more kind of participatory and all that. So we were kind of both looking in the other school and trying to look for some ideas. And this is where we came up with the hybrid model, which was to have a structure, but to organize outside of the structure, which was the Otpor model. So instead of confining people to the structure of the organization, asking them to become members and then kind of trying to fit in and try to kind of mold them to match the structure, we actually try to kind of build the structure that actually allows for mobilizing outside. And that was the essentially the result of these two organizing schools coming together. And that actually leads us to the essence, which is the Otpor model, the so-called ART model, act, recruit, train, which is at the bottom or at the core of the whole Otpor strategy. So no matter which campaign we did, no matter what kind of direction we took, no matter what particular decision we made that was matching like the circumstances, the political situation, opportunities or challenges that we faced, always at the end of the day, at the core of our daily work was the recruit, train, and act cycle that we were maintaining. Why did we maintain this? Because we wanted to increase participation. So first thing that that I would like to kind of point out in this model is that most people and most organizations, and when we were doing our protest as well, we were trying to find people to mobilize them so that we can do particular actions, be it demonstrations or strikes or whatever it was. So when we were organizing protests at the Belgrade University, like something happens and we say, okay, this calls for a demo. So what do? We go into the university buildings, we go to libraries, we go to dormitories, and we start pulling people out because we know where these people are. And we ask them, come on, we have to go, we have to do this, we have to kind of raise our voice, and we have to, how shall I say, make particular demands. And people would respond, and they would come out, and they would participate in demonstrations, and then they would go home. So our kind of when we realized that actually we took people and we took participation as means, we kind of considered it as means towards the end, and the end was to achieve a particular objective, be it to organize a strike or a march or something. We actually realized that we didn't appreciate the people that were joining in and that were participating. And so the idea with the ART model was to flip it around. Actually, instead of mobilizing people to do actions, we actually started looking at actions as means to mobilize people, to increase participation. So instead of going where our supporters are and people who were sympathetic and pulling them out, taking them to the streets and mobilizing them, we started thinking, how can we do actions where people who are not our supporters are, and to use these actions to recruit more people, to increase participation, and to kind of bring them into the movement. So the first element of the ART model is to put the action first. Action is the method to recruit people, rather than to recruit people to organize actions. So that was the first flip. The second flip was that when we recruit people, we had to figure out what to do with them. And this is where our friends that were members of political parties were really helpful, because we had no problem like communicating with people at protests, because we're a very egalitarian school of organizing. Everybody is welcome, everybody has a task, everybody has a role to play. But at the end of the day, they all go home. So we were looking at like, okay, so how do these people from political parties, from trade unions, from these kind of traditional organizations, what do they do? And so what they do is actually they recruit people. And when they recruit people, these new recruits come to an already established organization. They invite them to a chapter, local chapter, you know, when there is like a weekly meeting. So these people come. It's like Wednesday evening, and like everybody knows everyone, and there is already an ongoing discussion because they're in the middle of planning something, and you are a new recruit, so you're trying to figure out how you fit in, where is your, you know, who is who, and who is in what relation with whom. And that was kind of difficult for a lot of people, and a lot of people would either take the back seat or they would just give up and not fully participate. So we need to figure out, when you recruit people, you had to actually train them, you had to put them through the process that, you know, they actually are part of the movement. They're not just kind of recruits that are increasing the numbers, but they had to actually be fully incorporated in the movement. So that was the second thing. And then the third thing was to kind of close the circle, to also train them and to prepare them so they can actually continue doing the same actions that actually brought them to the movement, because this is where you can scale up. If I can organize an action, recruit people at that action, train them, and then if they can do another action a few weeks later and recruit more people, then the operation is not dependent on me anymore. It actually is self-sustainable. So that was the basis of the model. This is kind of how it was envisioned. So when we started implementing this model, this was you know, maybe like not immediately when we were formed. This was like a year after Otpor was formed. For the first like few months, me and my colleagues, we were actually doing the trainings of the new recruits. So one day a week was my shift, and I had to be there for like an hour and a half to train new people who were coming to the movement. So let me go just kind of briefly into like each of these steps, so that, you know, we can actually kind of see how it works. First, the act. So when we did actions, as I said before, it wasn't, you know, action for the sake of action. It was the action to recruit people, to mobilize people. So we were taking actions to where people were. Before we started doing this, our main method of recruiting people was through already existing networks. So we knew people, or we knew people who knew people. So we would, like, you know, always end up like working with the usual suspects. We didn't know that there were like parallel kind of pockets of resistance or dissent that were happening, but like totally disconnected from what we were doing. And so when we started going out, and especially to smaller towns, and organizing what was our kind of signature thing, was the street theater, like very simple, like installation, very simple, like challenge to the pedestrians or passers-by who are like intrigued by what they see, and they kind of start engaging, and the discussion opens up, and the potential for recruitment. That actually was something that not just kind of allowed us to talk to a lot of people, but actually created a lot of serendipitous connections. We kind of found really interesting characters we didn't know actually existed, and they were like fighting their own struggle pretty much in isolation from everybody else. This was like really amazing. We didn't know how many of these people were around. But because we were everywhere and we kind of started showing up with like silly street theater and silly actions in like places where nothing much was happening, like small towns in the provincial part of Serbia, a lot of these people started like looking for us and trying to find us and trying to connect us. So this was like some sort of a magnet. It kind of became really kind of like popular with everybody who kind of had the same idea but didn't have the opportunity, didn't have the space to express that. So taking the actions where people are, that was an important change from, like, for instance, what we did in the protests before, where we would like march in the same streets and like always like shout at the empty buildings that, like, you know, were occupied by the government bureaucrats, you know, because they were not at work or they would shut down the windows. So this was actually much more exciting because we get to talk to people that were like so different from us. They weren't part of our like networks or our circle of friends and acquaintances. And then when we recruit, so when we recruit people, one thing that proved really crucial was the cohort recruitment. So we created peer groups. We wouldn't recruit people individually. We would try to recruit them already as a group of friends, if they were, or if they weren't a group of friends, we would recruit them together and put them through a training together, so they become a cohort, they become a group of friends. That was important because this is how we kept the kind of the discipline, and like everybody was accountable to each other on this stuff. There was no top-down system for that. It was all cohorts and peer groups that were keeping each other in check and keeping each other accountable. It was much more efficient than anything that, you know, would be top-down. So by recruiting people, and these cohorts, when I started doing that, these cohorts were like rather small. We would like sometimes do like actions and then we would recruit like 3-4 people. And, you know, when we recruit like half a dozen, we would be like, wow, this is amazing. We have like half a dozen people. But that would be the cohort. That would be a peer group that would go through a training together. And so when we started that, our trainings were daily between like 6 and 8 in the afternoon, because this is when like people would finish school or people would have like time off, or, you know, they had like some free time. So 6 to 8 on weekdays. And then when we started doing it in like smaller towns and later in like really small towns and villages, it turned out that actually it was better to do like a Saturday one than like a one day, than to have like these small ones during the week. So it doesn't really matter. It's like it really has to kind of match the kind of the local situation and local needs. But whatever format was, this was, we would actually organize for that peer group, we would organize a practical training. How do you organize an action? And the most important skills there were like, you know, how you prepare for an action, how you use like different simple marketing tools, how you talk to the media or to the, you know, bystanders or whatever, because we didn't distinguish between the two. So this was like, how do you actually spread the message? And then finally, how you recruit people, how you keep their phone numbers, how you kind of call them back a day later, how you invite them for a training, and all these kind of things. So, and then that same cohort, that same group would be put to another action. So they would organize an action on their own, and this would be their, like, how to put it, baptism in fire. You know, this is, they went through, they were recruited together, they went through a training together, now they are doing an action together as a group. And so these people would stay in the movement because they wouldn't stay for us or for the movement, they would stay because of their friends that they just made. And this was like a really important component of the whole model. So we took the actions where people were, we recruited them, we recruited them in cohorts, in peer groups, and then the training that we gave them was very practical and was immediately followed by a small action that they had to organize. So I said this was under every campaign and every big operation that we undertook. So how did it play out? So as I said, we started this model a year after Otpor was formed. So within the first year, we actually managed to grow to around 2,000 activists around the country, and immediately after the program was started, and we were like training, I tell you, like on a daily basis, constantly doing trainings for the first couple of months of new people. We managed actually to increase the number by tenfold, and it was like a really exponential rise. In the next 6 months, we actually managed to kind of go up to 80,000. And this was the moment where the mass mobilization actually reached its peak, and when actually Milosevic was brought down. And then what we had was a sudden drop. Within the next 6 months, the numbers came back to around 20,000. So it turns out that, you know, the 20,000 was the number of people that we actually achieved through the ART model, through the active act, recruit, and train, increased participation model. Everything else that we achieved later was like, you know, from 20,000 to 80,000. This was like a mass mobilization that was totally out of our control. This was like people who were, you know, joining in because it was like cool and all that stuff, and then they later, when it was over, they left, which is similar to most mobilizations. But I think that this rise between like October of '99 and April of 2000 was significant because it created this backbone, this structure around which we could mobilize more people. And this is actually where mobilization reached its peak in October of 2000. And as you can see in this picture, there isn't a single Otpor flag there, because the mobilization that happened actually was so big. There was like 1 million people in the streets that Otpor was just like marginal as a group. But that's actually what you end up becoming when you are a catalyst. You know, when catalyst creates a chain reaction, then stops playing the important role in the end. And this is actually what was happening. It was a brief moment of mass mobilization, but at the same time, you know, it was a potential for like great transformation, because these brief moments of mass mobilization, they do shake people completely out of their boots, and like their perceptions, the way they see the world around them completely changes, which is not the end of the journey. This is a potential for transformation. And so when you talk to people, there are a lot of people in Serbia who now talk about like the kind of missed opportunity, and you know, all the things that we could have done and we didn't do, and all that stuff. So in a sense, the work wasn't done on that moment, but it did create the potential for transformation. And in some areas that transformation happened, and in some areas it didn't. And but it's, you know, I kind of like to think of it as a marathon, you know. So in a sense, like, you know, there are a lot of people who are like really sprinting in the first 100 meters to be seen in the cameras, but you know, marathon is actually something completely different. And you know, the cameras are not there throughout most of the race, and we don't actually observe what is going on there. So, you know, I don't want to kind of sell this as a panacea, as like, you know, well, once you do this model, then like everything is going to be solved. It is part of the marathon, but it is an important and kind of valuable lesson, how you can actually increase participation and have kind of a model or a process which actually doesn't let the participation be a result of like outside events, but it's actually planned into the strategy of the movement. And it kind of relies on these 3 steps, and each step is defined by a specific characteristic: taking the action to the people where they are, recruiting people in groups, in peer groups, and giving them like practical training how they can actually immediately use the skills and advance the cause further. And that is my 30-something minute. Let's open the floor for discussion.
Awesome, thank you, Ivan. So we actually compiled some questions before this from people within the movement, and then also we want to open this up to anyone who is in the audience, well, the virtual audience. If you've got any questions throughout that, you can post them or put a star in the chat, and then we can move on to each person asking a question. So I suppose to kick off some of the questions, like what was the specific part of the organization that you were involved in?
So for most of the part, I was involved in what we call the press department, which was actually the PR wing of the movement. So kind of we had on every level, like the kind of in the cities, in smaller towns, and we had like 4 basic departments, or 4 basic like groups that were teams that were working. One was my department, which was the press department. So we called it the press department, but it was any kind of outside communication. So even if you had to do it with how you talk to people at family gatherings, we would like organize these trainings. Although, you know, these were your relatives, not journalists, but we kind of used the same model of practicing. How do you practice? How you answer questions? How you make your case? How you kind of put a challenge to the people, but not put them away, or, you know, kind of make them cross or something. So there were like these methods that we used. And another department was the so-called like networking department. This was people who were recruiting, and their main kind of task was to see who can actually spread the movement further, and like which are the demographic groups that were not covered, that are not recruited, you know, who is underrepresented. And so this was their kind of main kind of angle and main direction. The third one was the so-called marketing department. So this was actually, we called it the marketing department, but actually this was like a creative bunch. So these were people who were actually doing creating like you know, the materials, like anybody who had either a good handwriting or like could draw or could like use Corel or Photoshop or something like that was in that department. And then the fourth and the, like say, the largest one was the actions department. So these were people who were actually organizing these actions and, you know, like thinking like what is the next crazy thing they could do. And, you know, they were pretty much responsible for like all the logistics and everything that was. So that was, we had it like in every town, in every small town, even if those departments were like consisted of like 3 people each. This was the idea. And then, you know, these people would together organize actions, and they would have different aspects covered. So this was kind of tactical. Tactical excellence was at the basis of everything that we did. Like it came before we ever did a single campaign. When we achieved tactical excellence, when we could pull off a tactic, an action, like brilliantly without any flaws, and we would get like, you know, coverage in the media, or, you know, we would get like something that is kind of like good review from like some kind of opinion maker or whatever. This was important before we even started thinking about campaigns. And then we eventually did, and we did organize a number of campaigns. But I think this was something that was necessary for the kind of for the operation to work on that level. So let me see. So who designed the grand strategy, milestones, and campaigns? Was it central or decentralized and organic? So here is the thing. So when we started, and I shared that graph, when we started, it was like a very small group, and in the immediate period, in the first year, it didn't grow much. So we were still in the hundreds when we came up with our grand strategy. And so grand strategy was pretty much front-loaded before we had a lot of people that were recruited. So there was no, how should I say, there was no movement when we had the strategy. It was like still a small group of people. But what was important is that that strategy, which actually just said what is the overall goal and what is the method of the movement, how are we going to achieve that goal, that was set in stone, and everybody who would join the movement had to accept the goals and the methods. But under that, there was a great tactical autonomy on the local level. So a lot of people could do things that were appropriate for their setting, for their town, for their community, without ever needing to ask for permission. And I kind of go back to that idea of like peer groups, and peer accountability was the way we kind of kept everybody in line. It wasn't like accountability to the some central committee or something. But it was important to have that strategy when the group was still small, because, and then after that, you know, it couldn't be changed for different reasons. First one is like a mass movement. How do you vote? Second thing is, you know, when the repression happened, how do you actually even bring people together to discuss anything? It was very difficult. So in a sense, front loading the strategy was key to kind of have that beforehand, but to have it like flexible enough so that, you know, we don't need to change things, but actually people can change things within that strategic framework. So that kind of is my kind of answer to that question. Let me go to the next one, because it's kind of similar, and then we can open the the floor. So the question, how might this strategy change for a movement with less popular support? Less than 5% of the people in many countries are vegan, so it's hard to get mass mobilization of animal rights activists. So this is the thing. The thing is that, you know, when we were kind of building the movement, we first tried to explain to people why what we are doing is important. But when we started going out and talking to people, we actually found things that were, how shall I say, compatible with what we were doing, but it were completely different. So in a sense, people had different motivations, and people had different ideas, and people had different thoughts. But at the end of the day, there were not all of them, but there were some that could join the movement for different reasons. So let me give you an example. So when we kind of started, we were the student movement. So our main kind of frustration, or our main beef with the regime, was that it robbed us of our future, and we saw that in a very generational terms, as if you know, like because our parents and our grandparents had much better life than we did, and we thought that we were robbed of our future. And so there was like a big antagonism between the generations when we started. But when we kind of decided to move out of the student demographic, we were looking at like what are the other social groups that could work with us, and the retired people were the first ones to come up. So although like ideologically we were like on so different levels, we're completely opposite, we couldn't actually find anything that we had in common. But what we found together with the retired people was the marginalization in the society, and like they were marginalized for their own for different reasons than the youth was, but that was like the point of convergence. And that marginalization actually later kind of led to like a joint kind of joint mobilization, how to put it. But we wouldn't know that if we weren't like reaching out to these people. So I don't think that everybody needs to have the same grievance, but I think there are compatible grievances, and there are compatible causes that could be kind of explored for like expanding the movement. So I would now maybe move to like if there are any questions like this, and then we can come back to some of the written ones again.
Cool, thank you, Ivan. So we've got a question from James, and then we've got a question from Ben, and then Richard.
Yeah, so I guess my one is like, what is the biggest learning you had from Otpor? And like, if you had to set up another Otpor, another movement nowadays, what would you do differently that you didn't do then? What did you learn, basically?
So I have to say, like, and this was mainly because we were young and inexperienced, and we didn't know like what was coming later. So one of the big things was that that we learned is that we need to kind of be humble about our contribution to a larger struggle, and that it's not like it's not like that we are going to do everything, but we kind of play a role, but it has to be kind of continued. And that means that you need to kind of have to work with the next like generation of activists, and you kind of have to hand it over to them. We didn't think about that. We were like really kind of consumed by our own like success and victory, and then later had a crash, because of that. And that kind of leads me to another learning, is that like we really didn't learn how to take care of ourselves, like personally. So we really had an experience like, you know, a lot of these rock bands that like crash in the end because they just don't know how to deal with fame. So we had similarly like a really glorious moment, but we didn't know how to deal with it, and we kind of seriously crashed after that. I mean, individually, and it took us like some time to recover. So I think that, you know, it's how should I say, probably two main kind of lessons that came up. So like one kind of more general, and the other one more like personal.
Cool, thank you. I'm trying to think. Yeah, we can pick someone who's put a star, maybe.
Yeah, we've got Ben next, and then Richard.
Nice one.
Oh, there we go. So yeah, so you've kind of touched on this since I put the star up, but you mentioned that that it kind of came out of a lot of student groups that happened before, and a lot of people mobilizing were young people. Sort of what do you see as the role of young people in mobilizing people? And then kind of what would you say to people who are young, who are trying to mobilize in similar ways, and what advice would you give around issues that they might face? Yeah. Badly phrased.
Excellent question. And I think, you know, the why I'm a big advocate of like youth organizing is that I think that, you know, like you cannot, youth alone cannot do much, but youth alone can actually start a lot of things. And I think, you know, what our kind of trajectory shows is that, you know, the people who were in their like 30s and 40s and 50s were the last ones to join the movement. So it was like, you know, students and retired people, and then like high school students, and then like elementary school, and then like all kinds of like really weird demographics before like we got to the. But what is important is that, you know, young people are the ones who actually change people's minds. You know, they bring new things to their families, to their parents, and to their grandparents. They, you know, bring new gadgets, they bring new vocabulary, they bring new values. These are the things that, you know, that are really powerful. And in many cases, this is happening like spontaneously and without any plan. But in our case, what was happening is that like it was an effort by an organized group of young people to kind of influence the whole society. And I think the biggest transformation that happened wasn't political, and, you know, it happened on a kind of political level. It involved politicians. The results were mixed. You know, the jury is out. But on the personal level, the biggest transformation was the kind of really deep rejection of violence as the political method. And so we're coming from the Balkans, you know, like political violence is, I could say, endemic. You know, like we even managed to start like a one world war through political violence in our part of the world. But, you know, when you look at like the history, like the number of like political leaders that was assassinated is staggering. And so this is not kind of the case anymore. And the rejection of that was not political, it was personal. And it was like young people talking to their parents, talking to their grandparents, and changing their minds slowly. And there were other things as well connected to that, but it wasn't like the government who passed the law and changed people. It was actually, this is how it happened, through that influence that young people have.
Cool, thank you, Ivan. Okay, we'll go to the next person, which was Richard.
Thank you, guys. Yeah, thanks, Ivan. Yeah, brilliant talk here. Thank you. I'm from Slovakia, so I kind of a little bit understand like the but I live in Britain. So just really wanted to ask, because I'm trying to do animal revenue in Slovakia, so it's quite difficult to recruit sometimes. But so how did you finance as a student, you know, for example, training and your kind of like the training rooms, for example, and how did you come up with it? Because I'm sure you had to have some money. Cool, thank you.
Yeah, so yeah, money is like actually a big thing with Otpor, and especially like, you know, because later in the last 3 months of our campaign and all that stuff, we had like a lot of support and a lot of resources, like compared to the previous 2 years. So, you know, people tend to focus on that period and say like, okay, it was easy because you had like a lot of resources for your campaign, but that came at the end, and it came as a result of that tactical excellence that we created before. But what we had in the beginning, and this is kind of connected to the first part of the model, which is to bring the action where people were, is that, you know, you find really interesting people in these towns and in these communities, and the way they can help and the way they can support is also very interesting and very unusual. Like, you would never write a project proposal with those budget items to any foundation. Let me give you an example. There is this like completely bizarre, I don't know if this company even exists anymore, the German soft drink producer called Sinalco. And so the local distributor, this is like an equivalent of, like, I guess, Coca-Cola or something. Very obscure, but the local distributor of that company, I don't even know if it exists anymore, I haven't seen it, was like a small donor. So he would provide soft drinks on a weekly basis. We had like a local coffee roaster that was providing like half a kilo of coffee for the when we had press conferences, for the people to kind of, for the journalists to get that. So that was kind of another aspect of microfunding. We had the bus drivers of regional bus services, like intercity buses. They were distributing our material. So because they have like a luggage compartment that is usually empty, because not many people who take a bus from one town to another, they carry a lot of luggage, so most of the time is empty. So we had that as a free service. We had like taxi drivers. If you say you're from the movement, you just say I'm from the movement, they would give you a free ride. So microfunding was really important. When it comes to the Otpor office, it was a 2-room apartment, which means 1-bedroom apartment, like really small, maybe like around 50 to 60 square meters, that an activist mother kind of gave to the movement to use. So this is where we did the trainings. But that was only a year after Otpor was formed. In the first year, we were meeting in cafes, and we had like there was like a friendly trade union that would give us an office, so we would meet there. In different towns, it was different, and people had local connections, and they could kind of find friendly organizations or businesses that could help them out. So that was most of the operations was supported by that. Most importantly is that, you know, we were all volunteers, and we were all supported by our parents, who fed us and gave us lodging for like 2 years and didn't ask us a question. And that is like, big clap goes to them. You know, that is kind of unreported part of the operation.
Cool, thank you, Ivan. So we've got a question from Harley regarding decentralization and leadership.
Oh, do I read it?
If you'd like to.
Wonderful. Thanks, Dan. Hi. Yeah, I was just wondering, because I've often heard Otpor described as like a leaderless movement, or like, and I was wondering to what extent leadership was actually decentralized. And that actually I put another question in, so they're kind of linked together. So which is like, was there kind of a core leadership group? And if so, how was that organized? And was there kind of like jealousy or kind of conflict around people feeling like they should be part of that? And yeah, I was just curious about how leadership was structured in Otpor.
Yeah. So of course there were like founding members, and that is kind of, even if you kind of have like whatever structure you have, you know, like you cannot change the past. So, you know, people who were founding members are always, you know, there as kind of, they stand out. But the thing is that, you know, most people in Otpor didn't know who the founding members were, because it was like so big and it was so decentralized that, you know, they wouldn't even be able to say who these people were. So the most important thing here was and I kind of come back to that, was that cohort recruitment. So people who were recruited as a cohort would keep each other in check. The role of the founding members and people who were there from the start, they would actually, if they see that like something is bad is happening in one of the branches, they would actually go and quietly talk to the people there to see, you know, but like individually, like they wouldn't kind of make like a meeting or something, and try to kind of guide them how to kind of restore the, whatever it is, discipline, or, you know, to restore unity, or whatever the problem was. And we had few instances like that. But I have to say, most times it was the local branches that took care of that, and they were able, because of that collective leadership. So I think that, you know, leadership on different levels was important, and that, you know, you give people autonomy so they can actually make decisions within the boundaries of the strategic framework that is front loaded. But when you have a front loaded strategy, you cannot change it, but neither the founders can change it. Nobody can change it anymore. But it has to be flexible enough so that people can actually make decisions within it, and create like local strategies that work for them. They don't need to ask for a permission. But again, this is where this tactical excellence comes in, because through tactical repetition, you actually increase the capability to deal with more kind of complex questions. So you build your capability to even like engage in like top level politics, even if you are not like how shall I say, very experienced politically before the movement, but you do build that over time, and then, you know, everything goes with it, like the confidence, the judgment, the, you know, all these things. So in a sense, you know, we did come there eventually, but we kind of allowed time to play its role, and to kind of let this be built.
Cool. Thank you, Harley. That was a great question. Yeah, I know. I mean, leadership in Exxon and Animal Rebellion is perfect, so there's no need to ask that question, but I'm glad we double checked anyway. And I think Marina had a question as well. Why are you laughing, Harley? But yeah, Marina, do you want to go with your question next?
Yeah, sure. I was just wondering, like, were you worried that you would like create a lot of momentum, and then kind of create a vacuum, or something, and then it would get co-opted by like not in the way that it should have, in a bad way.
Yeah, and it did happen in a bit. I mean, not in a really bad way, but so one of the biggest like scary things is like that you start something, but then you don't control it anymore, and this was like I remember talking to one fellow activist. So he was traveling through Serbia and in the countryside, and he came to this bus station. It was like in a small town, and like the whole bus station was covered with our graffiti and like the fist, and it was like a small, like kind of insignificant town, and he couldn't find out who did it, and we couldn't find out who did it. So we didn't even know who these people were, and we were like kind of like we started that movement. So in a sense, it is like the acknowledgement that, you know, like that this is kind of becoming so big that, you know, you don't even own it anymore. And this is kind of coming back to that catalyst role. You know, when you're a catalyst, you start the reaction, but you don't control it. On the other side, we still had like tens of thousands of people who were trained and who had the skills and who had the ability and the judgment to make the right decision in their local context. So this was our guarantee. We didn't have the guarantee ourselves, but, you know, our hope was, and actually, you know, I don't want to go into that now because it's another chapter that happened like after Milosevic fell, but, you know, which proves how resilient that structure was, even after movement didn't exist anymore, because there were a lot of people who actually even like young people, like teenagers, who were coming of age in the movement, and as part of growing up and learning, they actually acquired these skills. And these are skills for political operatives. They could actually really make a difference in their local context, and they had the right judgment and the right values to use that for good. And so that was actually, I believe, a stabilizing factor against that kind of bad guys taking over or something like that. But that you know, that really was a challenge, and, you know, there were like several attempts where bad guys tried to do it, and I would even argue that they finally succeeded. But yeah, that's another story.
Awesome. So we have a question from Jan. Jan, would you like to ask your question?
Thanks very much, Ivan. I think you started pretty much answering it. I think my question was, how much of those structures then later, I mean, how many people then later on went successfully into politics? I mean, I know that you formed a political party, I think, and then failed on the 5% hurdle, which once again, I think has also been seen in the GDR, that those that brought the change then actually failed to be elected in. But so, yeah, so my question was were you then able in the end to remedy that lack of democratization previously and represent marginalized groups within the existing structures, or otherwise, I think you acted as a watchdog of the existing structures, I assume.
Yeah, so we tried different things. We tried to be a watchdog. We tried to be a political party. You know, I think that the biggest obstacle was, you know, we were formed as an underground mass movement, loose, decentralized, leaderless, and you know, that format just didn't work in a new environment. So we kind of were not fit for that, and so we were trying to find like a different model. And one of the things that we tried was to be a watchdog, but actually we couldn't be a watchdog because we were like, you know, we were too confrontational, because that was in our DNA. You know, we would like immediately go after ministers and forcing them to resign, and like, and then, you know, you don't, because the whole idea of a watchdog is you have to haggle, you have to negotiate with the power holders, you have to give in somewhere, and but that wasn't our. And we later kind of tried to be a political party, and that didn't work out. In hindsight, it was clear that it was impossible because when we did focus groups and we asked people why didn't they vote for us, we had like people really liked us, but they just thought we are kids who were beaten by the police and arrested, so we're not politicians, so they shouldn't vote for us. So they couldn't connect that you vote for somebody you like. But we brought down Milosevic. We thought we could do anything. So we were like, yeah, we're gonna make a political party. That is kind of that was a humbling moment, But I have to say, a lot of people like formed different small organizations, or they were active in existing organizations. They joined different institutions, but they had these skill sets and they had this set of values to kind of act within those institutions and organizations. But again, it's a marathon, and this is like now 20 years later, and you can see that like a lot of the things you cannot rely on that group to continue, and things are moving on, and new generations are coming, and new kind of organizing ideas, and whatever challenges and all that stuff. So we kind of should be also humble that like our moment has passed, and like the role that we play is with every passing day is more marginal. We're now getting to those where those retired people were that we were reaching out to back in the day.
Cool, thank you. That was a great question, Jan. And next we have one from Mark. But Mark, I know there's 3 of you, so one of you can go now, and then 2 of you can go a bit later down. Looks like Dan's gonna step up to the plate from a nice pen pad. It's an organized question.
Yeah, hello. So I was this has been really great so far, so thank you. I'm learning a lot. Just wondering around the trainings that you were doing, and so you're saying that like you had like a 1-day training on a Saturday, which you would have broken up into evenings. Just wondering what like follow-up trainings you were doing, like to develop leadership within the movement. Yeah, because it sounds like particularly like there was quite like high level type of actions being taken that were placing people as at risk of all sorts, and so like that level of like fearlessness you would have had to develop as well. So both in terms of like the skills, trainings for skills, and also trainings for just like preparedness, I guess, to take part in high risk action.
Yeah, great question. So my role was to within the training, my role was to kind of prepare people to communicate with the public and to communicate with the media. So what I would organize is like a practice sessions for people to, they would divide them in pairs, and like one person is the journalist, the other one is the Otpor activist, and he needs to or she needs to answer the questions from the journalist, and then we review it and see how we can change it. So this was like practice. We would go out into the street, and then we would like try to do it like so that they feel like it feels real. So what we would do also like with follow-up trainings, we did a lot of practical trainings. Like for instance, we would ask people who were arrested to give training to those who were not arrested on what to expect when they're arrested. So the arrested people would play the role of police officers, and what they experienced when they went through that, they would give it to those who were uninitiated. So when you go through that later, when you get in trouble with the police and when they take you in, it's familiar. You already saw it. and you kind of went through that. So that was one thing. For instance, another like advanced training that I did was this one was actually like really cool, and my friend Vukashin and I came up with this, and it was, I think, the most brilliant thing ever. I like have to brag about it. So we would invite prominent journalists to give a talk to our press department, and we would call them and we would say, you are like such a cool journalist, and like our activists really like your articles and your columns and like blah blah blah, so if you can come and give a talk. And so this journalist comes, and like there's like 20 people there, like, or they're like 19, 20, 21, and they're like asking questions, and they're like, oh, and what about this and what about that. After that, the journalist goes back and he gives us only good coverage. Like, we didn't ask for anything. He would just like ask to kind of give a presentation and a training how to be a good journalist, because we tell them like, look, these young activists, they work in the press department of this movement. One day they want to become journalists. So if you can, you're like a role model. But it was brilliant. It worked like a charm. We had like such a good coverage just from that like simple training. But the goal of the training was that the activists receive from the horse's mouth what journalists want, so that they're equipped with the skills how to write a press release, how to write a story, how to answer a question, how to give the relevant information. Because you hear from journalists, this is what we want, this is what our editors want, this is what our readers want, and you kind of go through that. So we would give these advanced trainings all the time whenever we could, so that people can actually improve their skills over time.
Brilliant. That's a great idea. It's resonated with a lot of people. And just back onto media, actually, Freya's got a question about social media, which might be interesting to answer. Would you like to ask it, Freya?
Sure. So I was wondering about, since social media is so important, firstly to like the younger generation at the moment, but also since it's like one of our only methods of communication given the current crisis. I was wondering that if Otpor was done again, what do you think the role of social media would be in your recruitment strategies?
That's a tough one, and I'll tell you why. Because you know, this was like when we were kind of doing this was like really a stone age of the internet. So this was like dial-up time. So you didn't even have like much time that you could spend online, because like you would occupy like a phone line that was needed for something else. So we did a lot of things offline, and we used like online tools like really kind of for the most important things. Having said that, I wish we had YouTube, because you know, we had like so many crazy actions that like we didn't even have digital cameras to record them. We didn't have photo you know, the only photo equipment we had was like film camera. Like, it's crazy. We didn't have, you know, if you don't have like somebody who has like a professional camera or something, you know, you wouldn't record that. So I wish we had YouTube. I think there is like a really big potential in like reaching more people with that. And what I see with the social media, and it was also the problem on a lesser extent back then, but now it's accelerated, is that, you know, if the messaging is not focused, and if it's not like part of like a elaborate planning process where you know what are the steps that you want to take and where you want to kind of have people end up with in terms of like, you know, messaging when they receive the message, it kind of goes into all kinds of different and wrong directions. So in a sense, I think that, it's easy for social media to distract people if they don't have the proper plan on how to disseminate that message. And a lot of, like, just an example, like it's easy to get into arguments, much more difficult to get into arguments in person, but you can still get into arguments in person. So the way we avoided that is we had like a very clear guidelines on how you talk to people who disagree with you. So you don't get into arguments, but you actually try to not to win them over necessarily, but to have them start doubting what they believe in. That if you plant a seed of doubt, that was enough. So the same thing with like social media. It's even like easier to get distracted and get off rails. But I think with like a careful planning and like a what is it called, like a step-by-step guide on how to engage with people, you can actually reach many more people like on social media than you could in person. And then again, YouTube, fantastic, digital cameras, you can film all the actions. I'm just like, I'm so sad we didn't have that.
Yeah, thank you, Ivan. So I'm going to ask a question next, and I was going to ask something else, but I feel like I really need to know what these crazy actions are now. And since there are no YouTube recordings, do you mind like telling us like a couple of the most memorable actions that you did? And yeah.
Okay, so let me try to squeeze in like maybe 10 actions in like 2 minutes. So okay, action number 1. So there was an eclipse that like in that was like August or September of '99. And so like for days before the eclipse, everybody was like, oh, there's going to be an eclipse, and like it's like a big deal and all that stuff. So we put like a big cardboard telescope in the main street, and we would invite people to look at the eclipse. And then when they looked through the telescope, they would see like Milosevic's head falling down, but you wouldn't know until you like look through the telescope. So everybody would like start laughing, and everybody would like push each other and try to see what is going on, which created even like a bigger interest, and like a line would form, but we would never reveal what was going on there. That's one. Second one, like we would just put up like a full-sized photo on a cardboard of the president, and then we would have like a photographer there, and we would ask people to kind of take a photo with the president, and then they would do things to him that they feel like appropriate. And it's another, very simple setup, like people come, people create theater, Another one, the barrel of laughs. So we put a barrel in the street and we say we're collecting money for Milosevic's retirement. And so please insert a coin. And then there is a sign which says if you don't have money thanks to Milosevic's economic policy, bang the barrel with the baseball bat. And then like people start banging the barrel, other people hear the noise, they come over to see what's going on, they see the sign, they bang the barrel, and then the police comes because it's how shall I say, too much noise, and like people are gathering and they're trying to figure out what is going on, and they arrest the barrel. So we snap some photos, and we make fun of them for arresting a barrel. Let's see another one. So we put like, this is another silly one. We put 2 pumpkins, one Milosevic's face, another is the face of his wife. And so we put them on the top of the tree, and then we like shake the tree so the pumpkins fall down and break. It's like totally silly, totally like makes no sense, but still people are attracted to that kind of street carnival atmosphere and all that stuff. Was that like 5? I thought I could do 10. We did one. This is actually really, really funny. So you remember like back in the day, this is like late 70s, when the Sex Pistols were playing, what was it, God Save the Queen? They're playing on that boat, and that kind of Malcolm McLaren came up with that prank, So we did something similar. We they were opening like a small bridge in a small town. They were like, we had like activists who were like on a boat under the bridge, and like they were like playing music and trying to disrupt that, and these guys couldn't like stop them from doing it. So this was like a like a very silly like a prank that was happening. So most of these, as you can see, they require like 5 people and somewhat creative process, but not too much effort, energy, or even not too much creativity.
Oh, cool. There's a lot of inspiration there. That's super. So we've got a question from Esther, and then we have a question from Mark.
Hi, thank you for all of this. So when you were talking earlier, I heard you talking about like NGOs and like political parties and unions and like all these different kinds of organizations that you worked with. So I was just wondering, like, how did you go about like building trust with all those different kinds of people with different ideas, and like how did you create like solid alliances, and how did you set up those like communication networks and stuff? So yeah, that's what I was wondering. Yeah.
So the first thing that is important is that, you know, because we were not a registered organization, we were just like an unregistered movement. So we were not a competition to these organizations. So whether it is a political party, you know, they wanna, how to say, participate in the elections, we're like, fine, we're not gonna participate in the elections. If it's an NGO and they wanna kind of like do like a particular project or something, like, fine, we're not gonna do that. And so what we were trying to do is we're trying to show them how collaborating with us is going to be beneficial to them. But then at the same time, we were doing our thing in the art model by increasing participation that, they cannot, how shall I say, neglect us. They had to work with us because we had the power of numbers, and we were able to mobilize people. And if they wanted to do anything that kind of needed public buy-in, that they had to work with us. But we didn't actually ask them for anything except to support the overall goals and ideas of the movement. Even not like, some of them not even directly. They just had to be like in kind of coordination and compatible with us. But I think that, you know, this kind of always open arms and always, like, you know, ready for a like handshake, and ready for a hug, and ready for like a love affair, but we have our thing, and we always can fall back to our thing. We don't need these people, because we don't essentially need anything except like to work with the communities that we are organizing and mobilizing. And so this is why we actually became so important, and we became like invited to every table. It wasn't like, you know, that, you know, we had to ask ourselves in. We, in the end, and we ended up like being at every meeting of the opposition parties. So they had like the opposition parties formed a coalition to run for the elections, and we were kind of participating in like every meeting that they held, although we were the only ones that were not member of that coalition. But they wanted us to be there because they knew that, you know, it's good to have us as friends, you know. So in a sense, I think that, you know, that investment that we made, not just kind of working with people or influencing people or raising awareness, but actually mobilizing people and making them part of the movement, paid off. Because this is where, you know, the power was being built and actually was influencing these traditional organizations.
Right, and then we've got a last question by Mark.
Yeah, hi. I'm just interested in how you sort of designed your strategies. Was it organic? Did you plan things from the beginning? Did you try lots of things, they failed, that didn't get written in the books? Like you hear a lot about sort of grand objectives, strategic milestones and campaigns, but is that just like being imposed after you succeeded, or was there kind of a design process, like random workshops or a methodology?
Yeah. So you know, when I kind of gave that introductory talk, you know, I mentioned there was like a number of different organizations, and Otpor was just one of them. So that was the first level. There were like all these other strategies that didn't work out, and ours did. So that is kind of, we always have to kind of, I always go back to that, because you know, it's easy to think that you are the best, but actually, you know, who knows, you know, in some alternative universe, maybe somebody else would succeed. So this was the first level. There were like different organizations, they tried different things. Otpor strategy was the one that proved to be the right one. The second level is that going back to that tactical excellence, we did tactics long before we came up with the strategy. So the same principle that we later used to design the strategy, we tried them on the tactical level. And this is where we kind of improved our capability to strategize. And if you make a mistake on a tactical level, it's not as fatal as a mistake that you make if it's a strategic mistake. So we did a lot of mistakes in the beginning, but it was relatively safe because we didn't have a lot of people, and we didn't have a long-term plan to kind of slowly screw up. You know, whatever plans we had, this was like a week in advance, and we could easily make a mistake. So then later, as that kind of skill level increased and all that stuff, we saw what works, what doesn't work, and then it was kind of easy to kind of formulate the strategy. But it kind of only in hindsight we can say, oh, now it's clear, we know what is the right strategy. But it wasn't so in the beginning. And I think that, you know, maybe the brilliant detail that, you know, is not just like error and like learning from the error, but I think this is like one part of the strategic design that was deliberate and that really helped, was that we brought people from two completely different organizing schools in the same room to try to kind of work together and to come up with a hybrid. So that wasn't spontaneous, that was deliberate. We knew our method had its shortcomings and wasn't good enough. The guys who were members of traditional organizations knew that like they could do only certain things but not some other things that they wished to do. And when we came together in the same room and say like, let's see how we can build like some sort of a hybrid. So that wasn't trial and error, that was deliberate.
Amazing. So we'll close up. Ivan, thank you so much. It's been funny, it's been fascinating, it's been full of inspiration. I'm going to post the Alone Together link that we have with all the other interesting talks that we're doing. I'd like to pass over to James just to close up.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you, Ivan, so much. That was such enlightening an hour and a half. And the last thing about experimentation is so interesting, like that we should be kind of willing to take risks and try things, and kind of makes me think of when we did that. We had a vegetable dance party dressed as like giant broccolis, and like who would have thought that could have actually gone well? But like hearing that you just tried stuff and like made it happen, like this is quite like reassuring. So I guess thank you so much. And I have a list of stuff to buy. It includes pumpkins, barrels, and a telescope. So I'm looking forward to the next few weeks. So thanks so much for all the inspiration. And yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you guys. This was really awesome. I really enjoyed it.
Cool.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Have a good one, Ivan.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was great.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
That was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Come again.
Thank you.
Come again.
Join Animal Rebellion.
Yes.
All right, everyone, go home. Why are you still on the call?
We're waiting for someone to end the call.
Go enjoy your Friday night. Come on.
We're not all in the woods here,
Friday night.
James.
I don't know what they're saying.
Obviously, you know, like Ivan, if you're sticking around 5 minutes and anyone does want to ask any other questions,
Yeah.
it's up
No,
to
I
you.
get it. I mean, it's Friday night, but we're under a curfew, so it's like nowhere to go.
Not much else to do.
Cool.
Everyone.
Okay. I'm gonna end the call then. See you later.
Yeah.
Hey guys.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Bye.